things. But anyway, that's what they lived on. And you have to have lost your home and your source of income. These things qualify you to get this aid. And we would go from tent to tent to see the number of people in a tent, because that's the amount of food they would get. And they had to qualify as having lost jobs and means of income and the house. We still have refugee camps, and they're in these areas. Now, the Middle East today, what has changed, or how is it? Palestine is under Israeli occupation of East Jerusalem, the West Bank, and Gaza. Can everyone live in a secure, peaceful, and just environment? That's to be seen, not yet. And Palestinian Christians, they're very important in the Middle East because they have history, they have their religion, we have the holy sites that we protect as Christians and ministers, and they are like peacemakers, the intermediaries. And another thing I forgot to mention when I was saying about violence, there's one thing where priests, nuns, and people in clerical garb walking through, in priestly garb, walking through the old city are spat upon. That is a violent act, actually. And when they complain to the police, they say, prove it. Prove you have been spat upon. You have to show us a picture. Well, how do you know when you're going to be spat on to have a camera to take a picture? So it's hard to prove. We went to Hebron, and that was almost a nightmare. This is what we encountered, and a soldier came onto our bus with a gun, big gun, and as he was checking us out, none of us had anything to complain about. As he was going out from the bus, a small Palestinian boy was walking, he spat on him. Okay, this is a settler family who was stopped, and that day they said a young Palestinian Hebronite had a gun and confronted one of the soldiers with a knife, and the soldier shot him. So they say that's the story that they usually say, but believe it or not. So there was a death, and that's why all these soldiers stopped everybody for about an hour. This used to be like the heart of Hebron with stores and apartments. Everything is closed, and the Jewish Star of David is on it. The houses, some of them are lived in, but they have to climb from behind and go in and can't open these windows. Beautiful stone houses, closed up. Now, we come to the recommendations. Now, this is affirmation of human rights and moral principles. The first one is human right to self-determination, religious freedom, based on Universal Declaration and international human rights, including universal jurisdiction. Second, applying humanitarian laws regarding warfare to all nations, because you're not supposed to use a special bullet that's called dum-dum, which is a kind that bursts in you, and they use that. You're not supposed to use white phosphorus. They use that too. And who supplies it is a good question. Number 3, all refugees have an individual right to return. The refugees have not been allowed to return. And or to adjudicate, I don't know the word, or negotiate compensation where they will be given money for their homes or their land for the loss of both. We took a trip with this ICAD Jewish woman through the parts of Jerusalem, which were all Arab apart houses, single houses. They were all occupied by Jewish residents, and they are not paying rent to the owners. The owners aren't allowed to go back, and they're taken over. And fourthly is to create a nuclear-free world and sign the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. So we talked about Iran and Israel there. in the Middle East and the situation there. And we are still saying that they were right and these things should be taken into consideration and implemented. And an immediate cessation of all violence hasn't happened, but now it's quiet. End of Israel occupation and diversion of water resources. Palestine, I mean, when I came here and I see how people waste water when washing dishes, my mother used to cringe, tell them to put the water off. You know, we have to be so careful with our water. Well, if we had to be careful then, now they have to be even more careful because the water from Jordan River is being diverted. They have no water to, by the time it gets to the Palestinian people, there's hardly water in the Jordan River. And yesterday there was an article that says that the Jordan River might dry up in a year because they're taking all the waters from the source. So water is a very important element. Systems, they ask for permission to build systems so they can collect rainwater. If they build the system, because they don't get a permission to build the system, it will be demolished when it's built. Just like a house is demolished, if you ask for permission, you wait and you wait, you don't get it, your son gets married, your daughter gets married, you want to build above your house, you build it because the permission isn't coming, the whole house is demolished. So we want that to not happen. An immediate freeze on establishment of expansion of Israeli settlements. Well, you know what happened when our vice president went. They announced another 1,600 apartments to settling places to be built. Relocation by Israel of the separation barrier. Now, there was a 1967 border. They're supposed to move the wall to the 67 border. It is infringing onto Palestinian territory and not paying for the land and taking over the land and breaking them from their places. And he calls on the U.S. government to the strategic use of influence and withholding of financial and military aid in order to enforce Israel's compliance with international law and peaceful efforts. Now, somebody said in our committee, if you had a child and they broke the law and didn't obey you, you would punish them. You would not give them their weekly allowance, or you would say you have to stay home for tonight or a week. And sorry? Right. So he says, we need to do that with Israel. They don't obey. You need to cut funds, give them no military aid or weapons of mass destruction. And this is one piece that the Simon Wiesenthal and the Israeli people were very upset about because of this. But it's conditional. If you obey, you will continue getting funds. But when you don't obey, and then continuing corporate engagement through MRTI, which is mission responsibility through investments. Like Caterpillar, they say we should withdraw all our funds, but if we keep a small amount, we can be shareholders and we can have a voice in telling them you can't use it for destructive purposes. But if we withdraw all the funds, then we have no say. So it's a fine balance. What do you do? And then there's Motorola also, who has got chips and things and phones that they are giving to the US. But right now, they are selling it to the Israeli people, so they will not be part of it, which is good. And then Jerusalem, as we said in the beginning, is the crux, I think, and a shared status, because Israel said it is only their capital. Well, Palestinians wanted their capital. In 1948, it was supposed to be an international city, which would have been wonderful, but that never happened. And equal rights for Palestinian citizens who live in the state of Israel and are like Israeli citizens, but of Palestinian origin. And cessation of systematic violation of human rights by any party, and immediate resumption by Israel and Palestine to negotiate towards a two-state solution. We have a piece of land